why friends matter. In a few minutes, we'll be in John chapter 15. If you've got a Bible with you, you might want to turn that for you out. Before we get there, I just want to set the scene a little bit as to why we would be talking about this. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the pandemic, this sort of mass trauma that we've all been through, I've not thought about it in that terms, but that's what it is. It has really damaged our friendships. There was a famous op-ed in The Atlantic about a year ago that explained in some detail how all but the very closest of our relationships have slipped away over the last couple of years. But things were broken before that. Back in 2018, the US Surgeon General announced that they had in America a loneliness epidemic, particularly affecting middle-aged men. The UK hasn't had the same announcement, but the stats are pretty much the same thing. We lack friends. And this is especially true for men, though it's true for everyone. It's especially true for middle-aged men, and again, true for all ages. 60 years ago, C.S. Lewis, in his famous book, The Four Loves, decried the fact that no men had any friends. This is not a new thing. There's some things in the last few years that have made it particularly difficult. It's not a new thing. It's a problem that's been there for quite a long time. And we desperately need friends. That's one of the things I'm going to try to show you this morning. We desperately need friends. I saw someone write a couple of weeks ago that the greatest miracle in the Bible was that a man in his late 30s had 12 close friends. Which was funny and worryingly relatable. As a man in his late 30s. Let me read to you. John chapter 15. I'm going to start at verse 12. This is Jesus talking to his close friends. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. It's a dense passage, but I particularly want to hone in today on this sentence. No longer, verse 15, no longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. Now, I think that should break us, honestly. It should be earth-shattering, and I'm not sure it is, because I'm not sure I think we've massively devalued what the word friend means. Think about it like this. Jesus says, no longer do I call you slaves. The implication is that he could. That like a master-slave relationship between us and God would not be unreasonable. Which, I suppose in the face of it, we don't like the term for lots of reasons based on what people have done in history. But we can think about it and think, well, God is so far beyond me, I suppose. I don't like it, but I can sort of see that you could use that kind of language. And Jesus says, no longer do I call you slaves. And we might be thinking, well, what then? What's that going to be replaced with? So we've got master-slave. We might be thinking, well, maybe leader-follower. Well, that is like our leader and we follow him. Or maybe teacher and disciple or learner. Yeah, maybe that's it. But he doesn't say that. He says friend. What goes against friend? Well, friend. He's levelled everything. Do you see that? Master and slave is about as top down as it could possibly be. Friend and friend is about as equal as it could possibly be. God is saying to us something that I have not even begun to get my head around. That he's going to talk to us like we're equals. That's insane. That's actually insane. If you begin to think at all about who God is, think at all about what we're like, the idea that God would come to us and say, I'm going to talk to us like we're equals. We don't get to say that to him until he's already said it to us. He's leveled the playing field, which is what friendship is. You see, when you level everything, you say, we're equals. God is our friend. It can almost sound, it sounds sort of, I guess, trite. Like the kind of thing that you'd hear in the children's work, and we'd all go, sure, yeah. God's our friend. And I'm sure that, I don't know, it's sort of a nice song that we could sing about God being our friend, and great. And then God's our friend. God wants to be our friend. A few years ago, I was sat around a table with another couple. We, at that point, probably would have said we don't have any friends. They, for different reasons, were also in a place where they said, well, we don't have any friends. And I remember turning to the guy and looking him in the eye and saying, the most childish thing I think I've said in my adult life was, would you like to be my friend? And he said, yes, we would. And it would be hard to describe how that made us feel. Imagine if that was God who turned to you and said, yeah, I would like to be your friend. Well, it is. That's what's happened. Except, as Jesus pointed out, not the other way around. We didn't choose him, he chose us. So he's the one saying, would you like to be my friend? Where we can respond and say, yes. Yes, I would. I mean, I won't go into the story in detail, but this passage was one of my favourites. It's on the wall just above my desk. It changed my life a few years ago to particularly based on some things that have happened in my past, to discover that God doesn't just love me, but he likes me. Which sounds like a lesser thing, and somehow it's not. That he wants to be my friend. That he is my friend. That he is for me. I mean, God wants to be our friend. That actually starts to change every other relationship that we have in our lives. Now, before I get into this too far, the word friend is kind of slippery. We use it for a surprisingly wide number of different things. And none of those uses are wrong, but it just means that when we say it, it can be hard to know exactly what we're talking about. And I actually want to use it in quite a few different ways this morning, so I'm just going to try and spell out as I go through what those are. In fact, even the three sources that I referred to at the beginning, talking about friendship being a problem, all we're using it in a slightly different way. Well, I mean, we use the term, I guess, from everything from kind of at the bottom end, who are you connected with on Facebook, kind of through every relationship you can possibly imagine up to someone that you would die for. And literally all of that we call friend. Which is not wrong, but it does mean that we can talk across purposes if we're not kind of thinking about it. Let's use Jesus as an example. Jesus had a lot of different relationships in his life, a lot of friendships. But they were not all at the same level, there's quite a breadth of them. So Jesus travelled around, surrounded most of the time by a large crowd. But he didn't do this, but he could probably have turned to them and called them friends. I now say to you. That would have been a reasonable thing for him to say. In not quite the same way that I would just call all of you friends as I'm speaking, that's kind of how I talk. He could call them friends. And then there were the 72 disciples who travelled around with him and he'd send off to do things. Well, they're clearly his friends. And then there's the 12, these men who were incredibly close with him, maybe someone like Mary and Martha, and the other Mary, some of the women who were really his close friends. And then there's the 3, Peter, James and John, his closest friends, that he clearly has more time for and sort of have a closer relationship with him. And then there's John, his best friend, who is happy to refer to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. All of them are his friends, but we'll be using that word in a different way, talking about each group, you see what I mean? The sociologists these days would talk about the fact that all of us have strong, middle, and weak ties. That's the kind of language they use. Or sometimes they talk about the outer, the middle, the inner ring, or whatever language they might use. They're talking about the same thing. Our relationships occur at different kinds of levels. You might, even in this room, think we're a church. I mean, if you're a visitor here, you might not quite feel like a part of us yet, but most of us, you could turn and think, well, everyone here is my friend, in one sense. Even if I'm not sure I've ever had a conversation with them, they're my friend. Or you might then think about your life group, perhaps, as a group where you're like, oh, I know these people. I know something about what's going on in their lives. We're forming friendship. And then I would hope that this might not be true for everyone, but there are much closer relationships, and maybe even several circles of closer relationships to someone in the room. You'd be like, well, we're friends in a way that I'm not sure I'm friends with anyone else. The thing is, we all desperately need every single one of those levels. That's what the sociologist's conclusion is. Because you might think the answer would be, oh, we need those really, really close friendships. We do, desperately. We also need the middle ones, and we need the kind of weak ones on the outside. We need the whole thing. We need relationships at all of these levels to live, well, a sociologist would say a healthy, well-adjusted life. I just say to be a human. It's the wider friendships that the data shows that the pandemic has damaged, and that, strangely, we're not doing very well culturally. I'm not commenting on the church at all, but culturally, we're not doing very well in recovering. But it's the deep friendships, the really, really close ones like Jesus's, Peter, James, and John, that we've been losing for centuries. That we really struggle with, to the point that I think I can say most of us don't really know what that means, because we haven't had many, if any, of those experiences, those friendships ourselves. And it's really not good for us. There's a terrifying stat that you're 30% more likely to die if you don't have good friendships. Gosh, what do you do with that? So it is good for you, get some friends. There you go, if you take home. We need friends to stay alive, literally. And it's almost impossible to live the Christian life without a web of friendships at all of these levels. How do we know that's true? Because Jesus didn't try and live the Christian life without a web of friendships at all of these levels. So why would we? I mean, it's easy to say, sure. If you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if I have that web, it's a much harder thing to hear. But why would we try if Jesus didn't? To live our lives on our own? Why would we try and follow God as lone rangers? Jesus didn't. Why would we try? Because friendships are really hard and require a lot of work. There's a whole lot of reasons why the modern world seems to be less good at them. I'm not going to go into all that. But it exists, it's there. There's lots of reasons why we find it difficult. So no one is to blame if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know how good my friendships are. Don't know if I've got those really close friendships. You're not to blame. There are things we can do about it. That's where I'm going to go. But you're not to blame. It's not your fault. We need all these webs of friendship. But included in that are these really, really deep friendships that most of us are not used to. What C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, which is a beautiful book, describes as the least natural of loves. That's just a funny thing to say. And he essentially calls it the most spiritual of loves, friendship, in the sense that it is least natural. It comes hardest to us. And he would argue, and I think he's right, it's how the angels feel about each other. And it is therefore the love that we endure. It is the love that we will feel for other people in the age to come, and yet it's the one that comes hardest to us. So what do we do? In fact, what kind of, let me give you an example, perhaps, of what that kind of friendship looks like. 2 Samuel chapter 1. King David. Jonathan, his friend, is dead. And he says of him, I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. Which to most of us sounds really weird. And we think that's all sorts of things that is not. They're friends. But they're friends to the point where he can say, this man is the one he's loved most in his life. And he is distraught by the ending of their relationship. I don't have a friendship like that, but I've got two that are moving in that direction. I would, depending on when you ask me a question, I might tell you I have two friends. That wasn't quite true. But I have two of these kind of close friendships. Two people who would be at my kind of Peter, James, and John, though I do not think I have the kind of relationship that Jesus had with them. Yet. I am not standing here, in other words, as an expert to tell you, here is how you do stuff. But I have fallen over a lot and skinned my knees. And I've learned a few lessons along the way that I'm going to at least attempt to share. I've got two friends, one's in a room, one lives in another city. The one who lives in another place, it is honestly much more difficult because distance is a hard thing. But we talk several times a week, probably most days. And we try and organise stuff that we can do together when we can, which is rare. My friend is in the room, we again talk, I reckon, most days. And we see each other at least every other week for a kind of one-on-one thing. Probably most weeks in the last couple of months. Which is important. That content, I'll tell you, I just give you a sense of what kind of thing will look different for different people, what kind of thing are we talking about. Stereotypically, men do not have these friendships, and women do. Now, that will not necessarily be true for you, whichever category you might fall into. What does it look like, those kind of close friendships, those David and Jonathan, or at least on their way there, kind of friendships? 4 things I've noticed. They're forged in suffering. Both of my close friends, we became friends through something awful. One of them through a shared experience that was awful. The other, we'd been friends quite a long time ago, and we reconnected in the pandemic. And it was kind of, it's almost the suffering of that brought us back together. And I think that really matters. I think it matters because you need to, I think, you need to weep with someone, or weep with them when they weep before you can rejoice with them when they rejoice. It's typically the way. And so forged in suffering often means that you get deeper. So top tip, have some awful things happen to you. It's not really nice. But it is where deep friendships are formed. We have things in common. As in, there's stuff we enjoy talking about. So with one of my friends, we message a lot about music that we like and send each other songs. Or we talk about the novels of Brandon Sanderson, which we both great, which most of you would think I'm not interested in this at all, but we can talk about at incredible length about what on earth is going on in this novel series that we enjoy. The other friend, we're more likely to message each other news articles or things that we've read and talk about the content of it. And what you discover when you have things in common is that you actually have a common way of looking at the world. Because that's what the friendship actually is. It's not, oh, we've got a thing in common. There's nothing where it starts because you've got something to talk about. Which just really matters, actually. But you discover that you have a shared way of looking at the world. Third thing I've noticed, I become interested in what they're interested in because I like them. Which, a good example would be one of my two friends. He loves to tell me at some length about something called neuroplasticity, which I had to ask him what it was called so I could write it down. Because I called it the wrong thing when I checked with him the other day. I couldn't describe to him much about what it is. It's remarkably interesting when he tells me about it. Remarkably interesting. Couldn't tell you anything about it, really. I don't really understand. But he's good at putting it in terms that make sense to me, because he gets me. But also, I'm interested because he is. If you're married, you might have noticed a similar dynamic in your marriage. You become interested in things that your husband and your wife are. Or the way that my other friend has spent the week watching the curling so that he can message me live about it through that. I mean, he wasn't up last night, sadly, able to watch the joy. You're actually very lucky you've not got 35 minutes on Eve Newhead's career, which is, we've been up for a long time. It's quite late last night. The match started at 1 a.m. They take about 3.5 hours. Which I could tell you about. If you'd like to hear about Eve's amazing achievement and how proud Helen and I are of her, come and talk to us over coffee later. We love curling. Not most people's thing, I appreciate. We don't only watch it every 4 years, there's another tournament next month. We'll find a way. But my friend has spent the week watching the curling that wasn't on the Crazy Times and messaging me about it because he loves me, essentially. chose to watch it, to join in. I don't actually think he's interested, but he wants to be able to make dry jokes about it, so he has to watch enough of it that he can make a joke, which is fair. The fourth thing I've noticed, we tell the truth to each other unvarnished, particularly about ourselves. There's a poet used the phrase that friendship is a hopeful fear, in the sense that what you do is you give each other, you open up, you become vulnerable, you give the other person, if you like, a weapon to hurt you with, and you trust them that they'll do the opposite and turn it into a shield to defend you with. We tell each other the truth, as best as we're able. Does that sound like anyone else? Forged in suffering, common way of looking at the world, become interested in what they're interested in, tell the truth. To me, that sounds a little bit like me and Jesus, which maybe shouldn't surprise us. Because we need friends, and God is our friend. And we learn how to be friends, first by being friends with God. We need these deep friendships. We need the wider friendships too. In fact, your 12 come from your 72, and your 3 come from your 12. The numbers don't matter. We're not going to have as many friends as Jesus did. I don't think we have the emotional capacity for it. But the idea of it, that the close friends come from the group outside, and they come from the group outside, will be true for us as well. We need those wider friendships too. I think as the series goes on, we talk about all sorts of different things. We'll probably pick up this theme a few times. We need friends, but we do especially with these really deep friendships. How do you make one? I'm in some ways not the person to ask, but how do you make one? Well, I've got 3 lessons that I'm learning the hard way. The first one, you show up. You make time. Friendship takes a remarkably long time. Of my 2 close friends, both of whom I think were kind of at the beginning of what a close friendship might look like, that will take a long time. One of whom I've known for 15 years. The other, I don't know, probably more like 5 to 10, somewhere. I don't know when we actually first started getting to know each other, but it takes a long time. But some of us will think, what's the point then? Everything worth doing takes a long time, if I'm honest. Everything in the kingdom worth doing takes a long time. But it's good all the time, if that makes sense. Friendship, deep friendships take an incredibly long time, probably most of your life. But they're worth starting. And then they'll get deeper. You can't shortcut it. I've tried to do that a surprising number of times. I've rarely learned my lesson. I wonder if I've still learned my lesson. But shortcutting doesn't help. It takes time, a lot of time. Second thing I'm learning, take the initiative when you can. So essentially, how do you make a friendship? You do 2 things. Firstly, you're hospitable, which, yes, I mean, maybe getting down to your table to eat food if that's an available option for you, but in the wider sense of you invite people to do stuff, you invite them in. So literally, an activity you like doing, invite someone to come do it with you. That's how you start a friendship. And the second thing, you're vulnerable. You choose to open up a little bit more than they have, and then they'll go, oh, okay, that deep. And then they'll choose to open up maybe a little bit more than you have. And you'll go, oh, flip. I don't know if I've got that deep. And then you'll find out that maybe you have, and you open up a little bit, and you kind of one-up each other. That Romans 12 thing about do one another in showing honour. It's the same kind of principle. Outdo one another in being hospitable. Outdo one another in being vulnerable. A guy called Hugh Black, who wrote a book on friendship, says the secret of friendship is just the secret of all spiritual blessings. The way to get is to give. Sucks, doesn't it? The reality for you. But I mean, I doesn't know how it feels. You're like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's true, but can't they be the one to do it? Oh, I've lived that. It's not worth it. You take the initiative where you're able to. And the third thing I'm learning is essentially the first 2 things again, but be patient and keep showing up. Whatever happens, whether it goes well or badly, keep going. There probably is a point for going, this is not a thing, but just keep going. keep trying, keep putting yourself forwards, keep being vulnerable, keep being hospitable, keep moving in their direction, and see what happens. Which is easy when it's easy, and incredibly hard when it's not. But why are those the three lessons? Because, look at it this way, that is exactly what Jesus has done for you. He has showed up and made time. We don't think about it in these terms, I imagine. But that's what he's done in your life. He's made time for you. And allowed a friendship with you to develop over a long period of time. Jesus thinks he's got eons, because he has. He's not in an enormous rush. And he's happy to build it properly. So he's taken time. He showed up. He took the first move. He took initiative. When we were in our sins, Christ died for us. But then he chose us and said, I want to be your friends. He's moved towards us when we've done nothing for him. He's been hospitable to us and invited us into his life, into his table, and into his activity, into his mission. He's been vulnerable with us. And you might think, has Jesus been vulnerable with me? He let himself be nailed to a cross. It might be quite the same thing that I mean when I say be vulnerable. Because the Lord doesn't have a dark side to tell you about. But he opens himself up so that we can encounter all of him. He believes that the way to get is to give. So to win us, he gave everything. And he is patient. Have you noticed that? So he's such good news. And he keeps showing up. Whatever we're like, however well we do or don't do, he keeps showing up for us. So essentially, how do you be a good friend? You be like Jesus. I mean, you kind of thought we were going there. It's kind of church 101. Except we can make the joke, but that is actually how it always works. How do you do this well? How did Jesus do it? Let's try that. Are we going to be able to do it? Probably not. But two things on that. One, it's good to fail well. As in, give it a good crack and mess up. Jesus loves that. But secondly, that by the Holy Spirit, actually, yes, we can act like Jesus, imperfectly, and improving over time. But we can do these things if the Lord comes and fills us. We learn from him. It's because he's become our friend that we're able to become other people's friends, essentially. So what do we do? What do we do? You can hear, yes, I need friends. And you can hear roughly how you might go about that. And think, so, but what do I do? Well, here's my action for you for the next, well, pick a period of time. Let's say the next few weeks. How about you think, who would I like to be better friends with? Might be someone you don't really know yet, might be someone you know quite well. I've been thinking about this. There's someone who would probably be in my middle tier. But I'm thinking, oh, you know what, there's been a few hints of something recently. Maybe I could press into that and see what happens. Why don't you invite them to do something? Doesn't really matter what it is. It could be go on a walk, have a chat, but it could be a thing that you enjoy, or a thing that you know they enjoy, either way. And how about you try and go slightly deeper than you've gone before, just an inch. See how they might respond. How about we try that as a challenge? Who could you take a little step towards in friendship? Because we might think, oh, we'd love everyone to be friends with everyone else. It doesn't quite work, but we would. That'd be great. It doesn't quite work like that. Like the really deep friendships, you can't sustain lots, but you do need some. Who could you move towards? And if you're on the other side of this, and you get the invite to the thing, and you're like, it just sounds like hard work. Either they are hard work, or the thing doesn't sound fun to me. How about you do it anyway? And choose to move towards them in friendship. See what might happen. Hey, nothing might happen. You'll have a time, it'll be great, it'll be fun, it'll pass. But it might be one of those. But it might be that little seed. It won't be a great friendship overnight, it's not how it works. It takes a long time. People are like, I kind of enjoyed that. Oh, and they kind of enjoyed that. Maybe we can press towards each other again. And then maybe be slightly more vulnerable than you were last time. Tell them a little bit more. And how is it that we can do it anyway, even if it sounds like hard work? Well, Jesus did. It sounds like awfully hard work. I mean, I'm labouring the point a bit, but seriously, he sat in Gethsemane with the opportunity to go, I'm not going to do this. And for the joy set before him, it says in Hebrews, which we learn is the church, which therefore means you, as an individual, as well as us as a people, he said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to step towards you in an act of friendship and pull you into my family. I've got two great friends. I don't deserve them. They're better than me. I don't know if they'd say the same thing. One of them's in the room. I'm vouch him not to look at him a lot. But I think I have. Because he asked that maybe I didn't embarrass him too much. But so he might tell me otherwise later. But I've got two really great friends who are better than me. And I long for those relationships to become deeper, that I could say over them what David said over Jonathan. Therefore, it sounds very strange. And I need more friendships than that at every level. And so I believe firmly that you do too. There might be one or two people in the room, I guess, who have a full web of wonderful friendships at every level and are doing great. I'd love to meet you. I'm going to give you some secrets. But I don't think most of us are there. Or some might be doing better, others not so well. This is what we need. It's how we move forward, it's how we build true community, it's how we become the church, one of the ways that we do. It's how we live rich, full lives. It's how we don't fall into the 30% of people that die. They all die. Watch this particular full stat. But we need it, we really do. But there's something we can do. Why don't you try and take a step towards someone else? The band are going to come. We are going to sing to Jesus, who is our friend, and has given himself for us. But as we do, as we look towards him and worship him and realise that he is a better friend than we deserve by 1,000 degrees of magnitude, why don't you ask Jesus what you could do? Yeah, I'll give you a bit of a challenge, but why don't you ask him what he would have you do? You know what, he might suggest the person you weren't thinking of. That might be a great idea. It probably is. Why don't you see what he would say? Why don't you see what he would suggest you do? I mean, if nothing pops into your head, just make a plan, it's great. But see what Jesus would say to you. Because he wants us to be friends with each other, like we're friends with God. Should we stand together?